Okay, our last time in Sim Kuf as well. The Yeshua brings something, which the Taz brings also. It's not put in Shulchan Aruch. It's seemingly pretty well accepted. A din comes from Rishonim. A special din of how you can have Isser, and when you do a number of Hamadas, when you use the Isser to be Maimed the Heter, you could, after enough times, you could somehow turn it, become into Heter. Okay? So you'll see on the slides, the words of Yeshua, it's Kedai to see it in words just because broken up, it helps us understand what he's saying. For me at least, anyhow. Okay? And the beginning of this, he says, a person, he took Cholav, and he was Maimed Cholav once, with from something of a guy. We'll see what it was in a second. He did a second hamada from that. He did a third hamada from that. So then, now if he wants to, he's allowed to take from that third hamada and use it to make his own. Okay, so the first 3 times he wasn't allowed to do that. That's the implication. Is the first 3 hamadas that happened, he was not allowed to do that. But that's what happened. So now, but in the 4th time, after he's done 3 hamadas, he's allowed the 4th time go ahead and use it. And the reason why is because the B'Sheish's words are after 3 times and the implication is that it's gone. Even though a maimed has an effect on the next food, but after this many times, it's gone. It has no more connection to it anymore, and therefore it's mutter. And the implication is that in the first couple of times, you wouldn't have been allowed to do it yourself because it would have been a type of bittul l'chatila. You're putting in something that's not kosher to make the next food, but by the last time, it's already gone. Kvar kola, chol shagayim, it's already gone, and therefore, the last time it's mutter l'chatila. I'm saying what is presumed to be the correct thing. There's Daki tshuva about it, and Dayan Weiss has in his tshuva also. We're going to talk about Dayan Weiss in a second. He has a tshuva about it also. That the question of whether it is really mutter l'chatila to do it the 4th time once the 3 hamadas happen. But the assumption Taki is that you are allowed after the 3 hamadas happened already. You're allowed to do afterwards l'chatila even. It's now after that 3rd time. It's completely mutter, and you could do what you want to. Right, that's the implication. Again, there's a so there's a Daki tshuva. It's a cutting mem test. You can go look at it. There's a lot of people who don't agree with this. I said that is assumption. I'm agreeing with that. I'm just telling you if you want to see more. Okay, so the right of this comes from a Tosefta. The Tosefta, it's in Psachim. We're talking about after Pesach, Chametz Joglav of Pesach is Asher, and the Gemara and the Tosefta says it's also connected to a Gemara that says that after the baker has used his sourdough 3 times, he made 3 batches. However, he does that 3 batches of dough. Then it's what the sourdough, as you may remember, is when you bake up a batch, you mix flour and water. Yeast comes in from the air. That yeast grows and grows to make bread. And if you take a piece of dough and you put it on the side and leave it for a whole day, that piece of dough will sour, meaning it'll get more and more full of yeast. The yeast will be more and more. But by tomorrow, it's a whole pool of yeast. And tomorrow you throw it into the dough to be made with the next one. It's what makes the dough. It's like we put in powdered yeast. That's what they put in sourdough. So if you did 3 batches of that, if the baker did 3 batches, then it's mutter. And why? So the reason is because that's telling us that after 3 times it's gone. Even though it was also when Pesach ended, it was Chametz over Pesach. He did the 3 hamadas. After 3 hamadas are over, it's mutter, and now you can eat the food. Okay. So like I said, it's not brought in Shulchan Aruch. Mechaber doesn't bring it himself, but it's brought at the end of the B'Sheishit, and the Taz, for the same reason, brings it at the end of the Simon over here. Okay, so we have a few questions to talk about. Okay, the first is, what's the when you do this hamada, these 3 hamadas, what's the ratio that you need in each of the hamadas? What kind of dilution do you have to do? The way we thought was simple to read is that in each of that, what you're doing is the goal here is to be kvar kol chol shagayim. You've diluted it so many times that by the end of these 3 hamadas, it's gone. There's what you start off with the isser is gone, and the implication therefore would be is that each of the hamadas, the isser has to be bottled b'shishim into the heter. It's not bottled in practice because it's davar maimed, but if you bottle b'shishim the first time, you bottle b'shishim the second time, and then the 3rd time, like after 3 times, the amount of isser that's left is mamish minuscule. So that's what we say, kvar kol chol shagayim. It's gone. It's already so diluted so many times.
That's a total.
What?
That's a total shishim.
If it's a total shishim, well, 1 hamad of shishim doesn't make it mutter. If you put something in and it's 1 in 100, Doesn't become mutter. So how do you get to kol shulchan? So he says, if I did it so many times, 1 into 60, and then a piece out of that became 1 into 60, a piece of that 1 into 60. Come on, after that, there's such mamish, such a tiny residue of the original that it's gone.
But maybe 160 total.
But what's 1 in 60 total? 1 in 60, if you did 1 in 60 the first time, would it be bottled? No, if you took Isser and you put it into Heter, 60 to 1, and it was a maimed, would it be mutter?
It's also, but let's say it was 1 to 10.
Let's say the first time was 1 to 10.
And the next one is again 1 to 10. So you already have, for the Isser is 1
That's 1 to 100.
Oh,
So why is that? No, what's 1 to 100? Had you put originally 1 to 100, it wouldn't have been bottled. So what are you gaining by making it 1 to 100? What's the difference? The point is you did 1 to 60, and then 1 to 60, and then 1 to 60. By that time, it's like so diluted, it's mamish not.
There's two inyanim over here. There's the bittul of the Isser, and there's the bittul of the Koyach HaMayim.
Okay.
This is talking about the Koyach HaMayim. It's not talking about the bittul.
Okay, let's say. And therefore,
so once you have bittul of the Isser, at some point, and it's the second or third time, whenever the next time happens, you have the bittul of the Koyach HaMayim.
so you think what I'm trying to do is first time about the b'shishim, that was easy. So it's like I have to take care of that.
Right.
Now I have to make it no longer have a connection to its original hamada. After so many times it lost its power. Okay. That's good answer. No, so it doesn't say shishim. I think it doesn't say shishim because that's obvious. When you do it, no, it's obvious when you make yogurt. That's how you do it. We'll see the second. Yeah, you'll see the second. That's how you. That is what you're supposed to do. And the assumption. I know that. And the assumption is that the point is the first time it wouldn't have been good enough only because it was a maimed. After so many times of repeating the same thing, not that you did something funny, you repeated the same thing. Then that's what I would have thought. And that's the truth how dying life starts. The whole beginning of the tshuva assumes like that. That's the assumption. But later in the tshuva, he's Kosher. He says no, he doesn't think it's true, and he learns it. It's actually very similar to what David said. He says he understands that the first time it has to be built up shishim. The very first time it has to be built up shishim. He says in the second and third time, we also need to dilute it, but not that being built up shishim. He says it has to be built up of course. He says, but the point is that in the second and the third time, all you need is it to be zev zagarim. Once you had the first hamada, it was not the shishim. So it's what, like David's saying, we're being mevatel of koyach hamada. We're saying it's not being maimed anymore because its time is gone. It's koyach hamada. Well, now it's competing against other things. It's a zev zagarim in the second and the third time, and that's good enough. So he says the first hamada has the shishim, the second and third just have to be but the baroy, and that already become a third. The difference is, the way I see it, the difference is that he's looking at it from a halachic perspective. The first time it was Bot B'Shishim, the second time it was Zev Zagarim and Zev Zagarim. And everybody else is looking at it that Kfar Kol Chol Shagarim is a practical thing. It's been so diluted physically, there's like so little left that you can't say that it has a shaykhs in it. Okay, so about 10 years ago, the shayla came up when they were trying to do one of these kind of hamadas. The way these are used, we'll see it later, the way these are used, this din is used, lamaisa, to make cultures. When you want particularly to make chol cultures. So cultures is things that help make cottage cheese and all kinds of cheeses. So those cultures, the derech klal are coming from places that are kosher, but we're chol stam. So you want to make the chol v'shol versions of the same thing. You want to do these three hamadas. Okay, so it's very much a shaila for people involved in making chol v'shol things, chol v'shol dairy items. And they do these three hamadas. So about 10 years ago, this question that came up, I was going to tell you, whether you should do 3 hamadas, you need shishim each time or not. So Rabbi Avram Jovel went around and polled the different Rabbanim HaMachshir. I'll tell you what he found. Okay, the Tzeiel Morav, who's giving Hashkachan, J&J, Rabbi Yashiv, and the Nir Bater, all said you had to have shishim all 3 times. The Nir Bater was quoting Rabbi Yelish, the Satmar Rebbe, through Rabbi Goldsweig, way back when, through whatever. That's they had shishim. And Dayan Kohen.
By shishim doesn't mean that he didn't hold Hanan, but we didn't hold Hanan. That's why we need it.
Because of Hanan.
The Hanan, we hold the Hanan that Rabbanon.
Yes.
Did you hear the phones ringing when I was lighting up?
Yes. Phones are ringing.
Really?
Okay, I don't know. Okay, I have to throw me for a loop. I have to think about that one.
We don't hold the Hanan that Rabbanon Melach Melach.
Okay, I don't know. Okay. Dayan Posen, who's a Talmud of the Dayan Weiss, he said you only had to have Roy the second and third time, and so did the Belover. Okay, him and the Nerbater brothers. But somehow he also said you only had Shishim, and Rebel Shib Shapta thought you need Shishim all 3 times. That's what they were doing. They need to have Shishim all 3 times. Okay, now and that's pretty accepted. Yes.
Just
just clarify the case. What was the specific case they were dealing with? They were dealing with, the case here is you have cholov that's Yahami cholov, which is presumably cholov Yisrael, the cholov Chamush Goyim.
Right.
So is that the case they were starting out with cholov Yisrael? That was.
They started with the culture. They started with the culture. The culture was Chol Stam.
That was the culture.
But then they said, we want to now create a Chol Yisrael culture. So they brought in Chol Yisrael milk, the first, and each of the 3 times. And those 3 cultures, so to speak, went in the garbage. They didn't need those. They weren't using those in practice. But they were waiting until they had done 3 Hamadas, and they said, now we've created a Chol Yisrael culture, and from now on, we'll only be minded this with Chol Yisrael. We'll only put this into this Chol Yisrael. And that was a protected Chol Yisrael culture.
And why did they need to start with the Chol Stam culture?
That's just what exists in the world. That's what if you go to the people who sell cultures, they're making Chol Stam culture. That's what they're making. It didn't exist.
It's very hard to develop a culture.
You can't start 100. You have to scrape things. Right, you have to scrape cultures off the bottoms of who knows what. You know what I'm saying? These people have an industry. So you want to make Chol Yisrael milk, Chol Yisrael cheese or yogurt. You have to get them from somebody. Those somebody now already there's an industry of Chol Yisrael. But how do you create them? You create those cultures. That's how you. Okay. So this thing that we're talking about is when you do the Hamada in the style that we're describing over here, which is what you would do. Okay, when you're making, I actually wanted to make, I actually was going to do it for our scene over here. I was going to actually make yogurt here. And I was going to do 3 Hamadas, because I spoke to a company that makes Chol Stam cultures to ask them to get it, but they told me that all their cultures that Hashkacha, people I talk to, are only cultures that last once. Okay, you put it in, and it makes the yogurt, and you can't take that yogurt and make another one. And there are cultures that last 3 times. Okay, this is going to come to the shadow we'll talk about in a minute. The cultures that last more than 1 time, that you could go be minded from one to the other. All those were
the culture that cut out to give into the yogurt.
Enough, there will be enough in there to go to the next one. They had a name for it. I forgot what their name was. They had a name for it. No, but they sell cultures. They sell cultures that are.
They don't want to market. More.
Well, they do sell it. They just don't sell it as kosher. Just Okay.
For more money.
Yeah. So
that was only 3 times. It's not like a limited.
Okay. So we're talking about is that you take one, you take a scoop out of one and put it into the next one, and you scoop from the next one for the next one. Okay. But when you make a regular fermentation, okay, Hamada and fermentation, they're just 2 the same. That's the same word. 1 is Hebrew, 1 is English. Okay, 3, the same thing. When you make a fermentation in the company, not for milk, when you want to make citric acid, okay, it goes through 4 stages. Okay, and it goes in agar strip. That's just the bacteria in there. It goes into a flask. It's a small little container. I forget the numbers in front of me. Then that small container goes to what's called the seed fermenter. That's like a bigger, 1,000 liters, a bigger container, and from there it goes into the huger container called the main fermenter. Okay, so it goes. You don't take the little bit of bacteria and throw it into a huge tank of, 30,000 liters. You put it from a little one. It gets slowly built up. Okay, but that's not our case. That's not negate to what we're saying, because over there, the whole of one batch goes into the next batch. But when you take the agar strips and you put them into the flask goes completely into the seed fermenter. You don't take a scoop out of that and put it into the seed fermenter. You're not being mavatal, then taking one and being mimed with it the next one. The whole thing is plopping into it.
The whole thing or not? From the Mashiach and the next one, who cares the whole thing or not?
Because if you're trying to say that I got rid of the isser, I have no isser left. Call of the isser, it's not true. The same original agar is being mimed just 30,000 liters. It's just doing it slowly. I'm just putting it a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more. I'm not doing the whole. I'm not taking. If I put it into over here, I put it into the first hamada. From that, I take one little bit out of that.
Let's say my agar strip happened to be volume of so much, so I can take part of it. But then the other guy started with an agar strip just that size. So then he also had to take a piece off, but he can't use the whole thing. Well, what's the difference?
I missed it. Say it again.
You have 2 guys. One starts with a big agar strip, one starts with a little one.
Okay.
So the big guy can cut off a piece and then use that size. It's the same thing. The other guy's using him as the whole thing.
I think like that. What happens when you change? You put the 9 into the culture, right? Into 100 gallons of mixer, right?
Okay.
Now you take a spoonful. What happened? Is there any of that original culture in that spoonful?
A tiny bit.
It's like
let's say a tiny bit. We'll say a tiny bit.
So that he's asking. So my what's the difference? Let's say the Chatzili put a tiny bit, or now he's putting a tiny bit. So what's the difference? The mindset that original tiny bit is still there. If not, we're not going to disarm, right?
If I put the whole thing in, I've taken all of the isser, all the isser that I thought of, I took all that isser, put into this container, and then to the next container, and the next container. Over here,
So give me a number, what tiny bit means? What does a tiny bit mean? What's
Yeah,
a number?
let's say an ounce. Let's take up
I think like this.
Let's say that. So if it's down to 100 ounces, you can take 1 ounce and put it in.
I think I'll understand the other. When you take a spoonful,
Excuse me 1 second. Does anyone here have their phones, their voicemail set? No, set. Their voicemail set to call forward. Okay. Rabbi, can I borrow Rabbi Landa for 2 minutes? Rebecca
Good.
wants to-
He doesn't too many questions.
I
you don't think that's a dinner.
Thank you.
What do you say? So,
No, because I'm trying to, no, I think what I'm trying to tell you is when you take a spoonful, the koyach is not just the original eager, but the whole thing has a koyach. So it's like a the goyim kind of a thing. That's what that's the tenet of this thing.
that what?
If the koyach would be only that mashu that's still in that spoonful, then there's no difference between the original. If you put just a spoonful, you put a whole bunch.
Okay. Oh, she says, if I take one spoonful out of the whole thing, then I'm taking a spoonful of this and a whole... No, the Zevzekrim is not from the thing itself. The Zevzekrim is, when I put it into the next batch...
Yes,
it's
what's the koyach? Only that original thing is the koyach, or the whole spoonful not the koyach? That's it. That's the difference. If the original thing is only the koyach, then the land is Rabbi Land is asking Kashrus. What's the difference? What's the difference? You put the whole thing, you put the mashu. The koyach is still the original list. What you're saying is that now the whole spoonful is the koyach, so like it's ever the goyim. I just want to explain what you're saying.
Good. I'm glad you believe I don't know what you said, but I believe you. Okay. So
I think already else understands.
okay. Don't explain to me afterwards. I'm lost. Okay. Anyhow, so now the next thing we need to talk about is a mistake that we once told people. Okay, and that is like this: there's something we call Kefir or Kefir, depending on where you're from. Okay, Kefir. Okay, and that is it's a type of yogurt. Yes, yes. It's a kind of yogurt, and the way you're supposed to make it, the traditional way to make it is, you take milk and you put into it something that they're called hives. They look like pieces of cauliflower. That's what they look like. You put these clumps of what looks like cauliflower in. They're really a big ball of bacteria, microorganisms. You plop it into the milk. You leave it there for a while, and it's a culture, and it turns the milk into yogurt. And then what you do is when you're finished, you take out your kefir. They're called kefir grains. That's what they're called. They're not grains, but they're called kefir grains. You pull out the grains.
What's a kefir grain?
The thing that looks like a piece of cauliflower. It's called a kefir grain. That's what it's called.
You originally called them the hives.
The hives is another word. Also, another word. They're called kefir grain. I don't have on there. I meant to, but
Hives equals cafeteria equals kefir grain equals big ball of bacteria.
right. And you scoop that out. You scoop it out, and now you have your yogurt, and now you have this for tomorrow to make another set. Okay. And how do I get kefir grains? How do I get them? From I go to my neighbor, who they have kefir grains. They break me off a piece, they give it to me, and I guess each time it grows a little bit. So he spares me a little bit of his, and I can make it, and I can go right there. Okay? So people said to us, well, I want to make this stuff in my house, but where am I supposed to get kosher ones from? Okay, where do you get them from? You get them from your next door neighbor. Well, they're not kosher from my next door neighbor. Where am I supposed to get them from? What?
Theoretical next door neighbor, right?
It wasn't theoretical. We got real people asking this question.
No, I'm saying your next door neighbor doesn't have kefir grain. No, their next door.
Their next door neighbor does.
Who is? Your neighbor?
Somebody got it, but that's what people said. So they make it.
So you used to sell little bins that you could make your own.
Yes, you go on eBay. You can buy lots of it. Okay, so people have it for sale. People give it to you. They make it. They give it to the next guy. So we told people they should make 3 hamadas from what it was, and then they'll be able to use it. And it was a mistake. It was a mistake what we told them that. And the reason is because for 2 reasons why it was a mistake. First of all, it's a mistake because when you put the grains in, what they call the grains, into the milk, it's not bought to b'shishim. It's not ever bought to b'shishim. This is big, chunky pieces that go into there. They're never bought to b'shishim. And more lamaisa is that they're not diluted. When you put the grains in, it's not the grains go in and they get diluted into the whole thing, and then you're scooping a piece out for your neighbor. You put the grains in and you pull the grains back out. They've got a little bigger, but basically you put it in and you pull it right back out a day later.
Just the yogurt from the top.
Right, you don't take the yogurt and give it to the neighbor. You take the grain itself. So I put it in, basically you put in a piece of cauliflower, you pull out the piece of cauliflower. It's a little bit bigger, but it's the same thing.
Why is it bigger?
Because it grows. And that's why you give some, and then you give some to your neighbor. They have some to spare. So but basically what you put in is what you take out. You're not doing it over here. You're scooping out some of the yogurt and giving it to the next person. You're taking the same grain. It's like being reused. It's been around for 100 years. The same piece of grain.
Well, what if you did it that way? I mean, what if you did take out the yogurt?
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. No. Well, that's not the tradition. That's not the way you do it. Maybe it could work, but that's not what people do. When people ask about this, hey, I want to get my neighbor's
Well,
grain.
what if you told people, okay, if you do it that way, that would be okay. Maybe it won't taste so good. At the
Can't say. Now, what we really tell people, what really you could do is, the seriously good such go to a company that sells kefir in a container. You can buy it in a container. They don't use grains. They use just plain old culture. They have a culture. This company has a powder, that they put in that's a culture to make the kefir. They don't sell grains. They sell a bottle that has in it the yogurt comes out of it and you eat it with a spoon or you drink
put
it.
in a little bit. Then
Don't make your own.
So you can't make your own. You can't make your own. They sell it already made, ready to eat. Okay, that's what this company sells. So if we don't have an eighth of people to make their own kefir grains. People want to have the grains and they can keep on making it every day. Every day you put it into the next bottle of milk and you have yogurt for tomorrow. Excuse me. So we actually do. People want to make Chol Yisrael kefir, and we told them about our company could have done it for them because those cultures could have been made Chol Yisrael. We could have made them Chol Yisrael kefir. But to make the actual grains, we had originally told people they could do it. They could just do 3 hamadas, and we realized afterwards that it was a mistake.
Do the grains break off? Do they break off and grow? Like, how does it work? These things.
What do you mean to
So
the
do
grains?
does part of it dissolve into the milk and then
I don't believe so.
onto it? Or
I don't believe so. I don't believe. I can't tell you on a microscopic level, but I don't believe that. Basically, what you put in is what you take out. You're basically the whole grain goes in and it comes out.
But the grain is not milk. The grain is a bunch of different.
It's a ball of microorganisms. That's what it is. It's a ball of. It's like
which is
like
not
sourdough.
pure chol. It's chol. It was all kinds of items that they put in here.
Well,
That they create this grain.
the only thing that it ever saw in its life was milk. That's all that it goes into. You put it into milk. Tomorrow you take it out. You put it into more milk.
The original alignment.
Yeah.
What
I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it came from 500, 100 years ago when someone got it from someplace. I don't know where it comes from.
For example, Lifeway, they get the alignment from.
So they use a culture. They don't use the grains. They don't make it with actual grains. They use it with a powder. They have
Which is chol right? But that chol to me is the grain. It's not just the chol, just not pure milk that's aligned with the rest of the milk.
It is. No, that's what it is. You put it into milk, it grows into more.
But
And then,
are you sure that the original thing is pure milk, or is different items?
I can't say I'm sure, but I'm comfortable saying that it's probably
I
milk.
mean, I find them case when I do that. We could find out.
But
If it would be different things together, it would be zevet again. It's not just the chol.
But it was easy. It could be switched over to Chol Yisrael like any other culture could be. Instead of growing it 3 times on Chol Vakum, we could grow it on Chol Yisrael. And then we switch over.
You're asking that you need shishim connected.
I'm thinking shishim when using the grains. I'm talking about a consumer. If you go to your next door neighbor and say, hi,
If
can
the
you give
grains
me...
are not pure chol it's but the different items that create the maimed,
Then,
it's a zevet again. So then, okay, so the shishim is right?
In other words, you need the 3 hamadas. You're starting out with pure chol stam, or what are you starting out with over here?
the person would start with Chol Yisrael, but the grain, the whole thing he's holding this in a piece of cauliflower
We're talking about the grain.
is...
Yeah, but the grain itself, what is it? It's not pure chol stam. What is it?
I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it. It just,
In other words, you're starting out with something which is already diluted. I think that's the other I was saying.
so it's diluted, Zolzine.
So it's a zevet again. Like anytime you have isur and a hector that's a maimed together, right? And if the shishim connect, it's mutter.
Okay, so what was hard to say that it's Zev Zegurim is because for the past 6 months, the only thing that this thing has been made out of is milk. That's all it does. My next door neighbor every morning sticks it into a bottle of milk and pulls it out the next day. So you're saying this thing is... 6 months ago, there was other things that were involved in it. That's not what it is. I mean, all that it's seen for the past 6 months is milk. That's all that it's made out of. That's what's keeping it going.
No 3 times Chol Yisrael.
You can't because you're not diluting it in the milk.
Well, you're adding more Chol Yisrael. So now the cauliflower is...
The peas, okay, but to the look of it, the piece it just is what it is. It's just a thing. Okay. Do you think we were right the first time? I don't agree. I do think we were mistaken. Okay.
And I was thinking there's a theoretical possibility. Maybe you could have been right the first time.
Who's the happening? Okay. So the on to the last part we have to do this. Okay. The when you read this page, if you just look at these words over here, if you read this, you would assume that his example happens to be a case over here with milk. That's what the example happens to be. But there's nothing about what he says that makes it think that it's special to the isser. Okay, what he says, just that was the example that he used. And he brought another example from chametz. Those are things that people do in their houses, so to speak. So that's what you would think. But there's nothing about what you're seeing here that sounds like it's special to the isser. If anything, the end, kvar kol chol shagoyim, is color. Like we dilute it so many times. It's like the Rush says, if 960 times it's already bottled. There's a certain point that bottle is bottle. There's a certain extent to how much even a maimed could be. That's what the impression you can get. So before I tell you, I have to tell you that there's a shiloh over here. What was the original isser? Okay, the original, and the shiloh doesn't really have to do with us, but the original shiloh was, Kaf Chaim learns that the original isser, what was the isser? Cholav Chometz Shulchan. What was the issue of that Cholav Chometz Shulchan? What was wrong with that Cholav Chometz? So in this picture here, there's a bottle of milk at the beginning. Okay, Kaf Chaim learns it's not true. Okay, Kaf Chaim doesn't agree with this slide. Kaf Chaim says that the first thing that's usher was actual yogurt. That was the first thing. Cholav Chometz Shulchan, which is a reasonable reading of it. That's what it means. It means a yogurt. Not that there's a bottle of milk at the first. That there was a yogurt at the first. And Kaf Chaim says, you see that yogurt is Gvinas Akum. And the issue was Gvinas Akum. That's what he learns. Kaf Chaim wants to, we didn't talk about that whole shayla, but yogurt, whether it's Gvinas Akum or not, well, not really. So the Kaf Chaim learns that was the original issue, was Gvinas Akum. Okay? The Dogma Mavavar learns not like that. He learns that the original issue was Cholav Akum. Okay? It happens to have been to use yogurt,
What is Cholav?
it means yogurt. It means yogurt.
Sour milk.
Sour milk. It means yogurt or sour. It means that. But what's the issue of that milk? So the Kaf Chaim knows that the issue is Gvinas Akum.
Does it make a difference?
It makes a difference to whether yogurt is usher, whether there's issue of Gvinas Akum and yogurt. It had nothing to do with us per se. Okay. But what it has to do is like this. The Dogma Mavavar is a Kashrus. He says, the din here says, I just said to you, the din here says if you do 3 hamadas, it becomes mutter. And seemingly it applies to everything. He says, well, I don't understand. He says, if you look in Hilchos Pesach, the Magen Avraham says, it's a pretty well-known Magen Avraham who says, that if you have beer, okay, it's another thing that people make hamadas. You have beer that's chametz, of course it's chametz, you have beer that's chametz, and you maimed it, you take chametz, and you maimed it many times, you use that to make another batch, and make another batch, and another batch, you take the brewer's yeast, you scoop off the top or the bottom where the yeast is, you scoop it up and you make another one, and then another one, and another one, even 4 or 5 times, it stays usher. That's the word of the Magen Avraham. Even 4 or 5 times stays usher. He says, so our din said, if you did it 3 times, it becomes mutter. And obviously, the Magen Avraham is obviously coming, lafuke, such a havamina. Don't think 3 times you do. Even 4 or 5 times it's usher. He says, so what's going on? I mean, here the Beis said it was mutter. Everybody seemed to be comfortable that the Magen Avraham says, no, even 4 or 5 times it's not like that. He doesn't mean the Beis. So what's going on? So that's the Mavavar's kasha here, asking what's going on. What is it mutter or is it usher? What's the din? Is it mutter or usher? So the just to go back to what we said beforehand, that that question assumes that in the case of the Magen Avraham, in the dilution that they did over there, it was Batal B'Shishim each time. We could have answered that in the Magen Avraham's case it was not Batal B'Shishim, and that's why even 4 or 5 times, the reason why the 3 hamadas doesn't work is because you didn't do it right. The hamadas didn't work Batal B'Shishim. There's a lot of mashmoisin over there, we're not going to do it now. There's a lot of mashmoisin in the Magen Avraham and the place over there that do a shishim each one of the hamadas. Okay, so that wouldn't have been an answer. Okay, but that's the assumption that in the Magen Avraham's case there's also shishim in each of the hamadas.
So, Chomet is the nice, if it is starting before Pesach, Lach Malach, is bottom, right?
Chametz before Pesach is, yes, but not if it's minded.
No, I'm saying, but the discussion is, it's only as minded. The minded is gone. The Chacham minded is gone. The Chametz is bought at the end, basically 4 or 5 times. It's not
so the Magen Avraham says it's not, right? That's the question. Over there it says it's not true.
You say, you don't understand that you were trying to...
You could have potentially answered if maybe in the Magen Avrahams case it was not Batal B'Shishim.
But that's at the end of, there wasn't Batal B'Shishim the first couple of times, before, and it's all before Pesach, it doesn't make a difference, right? Comes Pesach, by the time Pesach comes out, that is Batal B'Shishim, and it's already 4 or 5 times a month.
No. If each of the 3 hamadas has to have Batal B'Shishim.
I'm saying that's when it is B'Shatz Meister. Here's Chometz before Pesach, when it's no...
It could be more kal, you say.
That's
it would be more kal. Okay, so you don't... Then my answer wouldn't have been answered even if it was that. Got it. Okay, good. It's not answered anyhow. I'm telling you, look, there's a lot of my shmois in place that there was shishim there every time. Anyhow, okay. So the Gemara says, he says, maybe the only time that this din is true, these Rishonim say that din, is only by Suffolk Isser. I'm sorry, an Isser that's based on Suffolk. So the Isser of Chol Vakum is based on Suffolk, which is maybe he mixed in trade milk into it. So those issurim are more kal. And since the Isser is based on Suffolk, so then after 3 times, okay, it's enough. Good enough, you don't have to be makbid anymore. But an Isser that's based on Vadai, like making beer, of course it's chametz. So then it's based on Vadai, so then it's not mutter. Then you can't do 3 hamadas. Okay? So Rabelski has an obvious question on that. There's an obvious question. What's the makar to this din? The makar to this din was the case of chametz. The makar of this din was chametz all over Pesach. Chametz after Pesach, if the baker does it 3 times, you're allowed to eat it. No, that's it, Vadai. Well, why is he saying...
Direct steer to the Magen Avraham.
What?
If accept is direct steer to the Magen Avraham.
It's not a direct steer to the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham You'll hear in a second the other answers. You'll see it's not direct. You'll hear the answers. You'll realize yourself.
Isn't the Gemara talking about Chamisha on the Pesach?
No, it's on Pesach.
No, on Pesach.
That's possible.
He wants you remind me.
What's the guy being minded? Beer?
Yeah, he's making beer out of honey or something else. He's taking brewer's yeast and he's fermenting something else with that.
Maybe that's what it said.
Chametz. Okay, hold. Let's look at it. Yes, you're right about that. Okay, so why don't you say that? How can you say that it's only also by issurim that are based on sveikas when chametz over Pesach is not based on sveikas? Okay, so it could be impossible. I mean, it's like such a glaring question. So it could be that the Dagmar Baba understood that the Gemara talks about that there's such a possibility that you could buy chametz right after Pesach. These breads, the Nesha Machlifin. The Gemara talks about that there's a possibility that in order to avoid the issur of chametz over Pesach, the person will have to trade his sourdough with somebody else who is not usher. Okay, so that is to say, there is a certain element of suffix. There's an element that maybe the sourdough that the baker used was not the sourdough that he kept over Pesach. It's the sourdough that he did not keep over Pesach. Maybe he switched it with somebody else. Now, we don't really think that's what happened. But maybe that's enough to make it into a issur based on suffix, then we could be makel. Okay, it's not a great answer. Ravelsky had his own answer. He's not explaining the Dogma Rabba. He's giving his own answer. His own answer to the question was the steer between the Magen Avraham and seemingly the steer between the Magen Avraham there and the Itzataz and Beis Yosef here. He wanted to say was maybe we're only makel by issurim d'Rabbanan. Maybe when the Shiloh is a Shiloh of a Deraisa, maybe we're talking about chametz on Pesach. That's what the Magen Avraham is talking about. Chametz on Pesach are not going to be makel. Chametz after Pesach or chol vakum, these kind of issues are only issurim d'Rabbanan. That's only to be makel. The way Rav Osir explained it is that this idea of chol shagaim, it's already gone. It's sort of a judgment and a hashara, and it's not something that's so firm and with such good makaris to it. So we say for Yisroel D'Rabbanan, we're willing to be samach on this hashara that after 3 hamadas it's gone. But to say for an Issa D'Raisa, the person might be eating chametz on Pesach, we're not willing to go that far. That was his answer. Rav Osir himself, in answering this question, says either it's a chumrah de Pesach. Okay, chumrah de Pesach, that's what we're trying to get at. Which is an obvious difference. Eating beer on Pesach and eating bread after Pesach is not the same level. Okay, maybe it's only chumrah de Pesach to umak on it. Does that Magen Avraham is only chumrah de Pesach? It's not really chumrah, or a variation of that is maybe. And this does not answer the kasha of Pesach. A variation he says is that maybe chametz. The Gemara says is chimutze kosher. The sourdough has this really strong power and it could keep its chimutz going for a long time. So maybe for things that are chametz based, their thing lasts even more than 3 times. So then the differences between milk cultures and sourdough cultures. Of course, he's not answering the kasha from the Tosefta. The Tosefta is talking about chametz, the same chimutz kasha. Okay, anyhow, so to summarize this part, the Lomais is people only, by and large, only samach on this for issurim d'Rabbanan. Not to go from chol vakum to chol v'shol, that kind of thing, issurim d'Rabbanan. And there aren't too many cases of the rices. It happens to be, I don't know if this is a good or bad note. It happens to be that they only look back so far in making cultures. Yes, where did they get the cultures from originally? There's only a certain stage that they look back to know where the cultures come from. If past a certain point that they assume it's mutter, which sort of might be relying on this, which it was many hamadas ago and they don't rely on it. But when a person is doing a practice to actually create something, they'll rely on this kind of this din of 3 hamadas in order to make something from chol akum or chol stam into chol v'shol. That's the most common way that it's used, which is sort of to answer this question.